Hi everybody. All right, we're on to session 3 of The Tiger Rising by Kate DiCamillo. Here we go. Chapter 17. The next morning, Rob was helping Willie Mae in the laundry room. They were folding sheets and chewing 8-ball gum. All night he had tossed and turned, scratching his legs and thinking about the tiger and what Sistine had said, that it had to be set free. He had finally decided to get Willie Mae's opinion. "Have you ever been to a zoo?" Rob asked her. "One time," said Willie Mae. She cracked her gum. "One time went over to the zoo over in Sorley. That place stunk." "Do you think them animals minded it, being all locked up?" "Wasn't nobody asking them what they minded." Willie Mae pulled another sheet out of the dryer and snapped it open. Rob tried again. "Do you think it's bad to keep animals locked up?" Willie Mae looked at him over the top of her glasses. She stared at him hard. Rob looked down at his feet. "When I wasn't but little," said Willie Mae, "my daddy bought me a bird in a cage. It was a green parakeet bird. That bird was so small, I could hold it right in the palm of my hand." She draped the sheet over one shoulder and held out a cupped hand to show Rob. It looked to him like a hand big enough to hold the entire world. "Held him in my hand, could feel his little heart beating. He'd look up at me, cock his head this way and that. Called him Cricket, on account of him singing all the time." "What happened to him?" Rob asked. Willie Mae bent and took a pillowcase out of the dryer. "Let him go," she said. You let him go?" Rob repeated, his heart sinking inside him like a stone. "Couldn't stand seeing him all locked up, so I let him go." She folded the pillowcase carefully. "And then what happened?" "I got beat up by my daddy. He said I didn't do that bird no favor. Said all I did was give it some snake at supper." "So you never saw him again?" Rob asked. "Nuh-uh," said Willie Mae. "But sometimes he comes flying in through my dreams, flitting about and singing." She shook her head and reached for the sheet on her shoulder. "Here," she said. "Go on, grab a hold of the other end. Help me fold this up." Rob took hold of the sheet, and as it billowed out between them, a memory rose up before him. His father, standing out in the yard, holding his gun up to the sky, taking aim at a bird. You think I can hit it?" his father had asked. "You think I can hit that itty-bitty bird?" "Robert," his mother had said, "what do you want to shoot that bird for?" "To prove I can," said the father. There was a single crack, and the bird was suspended in midair, pinned for a moment to the sky with his father's bullet, and then it fell. "Oh, Robert," his mother said. It hurt the back of Rob's throat to think about that now, to think about the gun and his mother and the small thud the bird made when it hit the ground. "I know something that's in a cage," said Rob, pushing the words past the tightness in his throat. Willie Mae nodded her head, but she wasn't listening. She was looking past Rob, past the white sheet, past the laundry room, past the Kentucky Star. "Who don't?" she said finally. "Who don't know something in a cage?" After that, they folded the sheets in silence. Rob thought about the bird and how when he had finally found its small, still warm body, he had started to cry. His father told him not to. "It ain't nothing to cry over," he'd said. "It's just a bird." Chapter 18. Rob was sweeping the cement walkway in front of the Kentucky Star rooms when Beauchamp pulled up in his red Jeep and honked the horn. "Hey there!" he hollered. Beauchamp was a large man with orange hair and an orange beard and a permanent toothpick in the side of his mouth. The toothpick waggled as he talked, as if it was trying to make a point of its own. "We got you on the payroll now, too?" Beauchamp shouted. "No, sir," said Rob. "All right," hooted Beauchamp. He hopped out of the Jeep. "Got you working for free, that's what I like to hear." "Yes, sir," said Rob. "Ain't you supposed to be in school, or you done graduated already?" The gold chains buried deep in Beauchamp's orange chest hair winked at Rob. "I'm sick," said Rob. "Sick and tired of school, right?" He slapped Rob on the back. "Don't got a mama putting down the rules for you, do ya? Gotta make up your own rules." "Not me," said Beauchamp. He jerked his head in the direction of the motel office where his mother, Ida Bell, worked at the front desk. He winked at Rob and then looked to the left and right. "Look here," he said in a quieter voice. "I got me a number of deals going on right now, a few more than I can properly handle. Wonder if a smart boy like yourself wouldn't be looking for a way to pick up some extra spending money?" He didn't even wait for Rob to answer. "Let me tell you what I got cooking. You like animals?" Rob nodded. "Course you do," said Beauchamp, nodding with him. What boy don't? You like wild animals?" Rob's heart skipped. He suddenly knew where Beauchamp was headed. I got me a wild animal, said Beauchamp. I got me a wild animal like you would not believe, right here on my property, and I got some plans for him. Big plans. But in the meantime, he needs some taking care of, some daily maintenance. You following me, son? Yes, sir, said Rob. All right, said Beauchamp. He slapped Rob on the shoulder again. Why don't you climb on into this Jeep and let me take you for a ride, show you what I'm talking about? I'm supposed to be sweeping, said Rob. He held up the broom. Says who? Said Beauchamp, suddenly angry. Your daddy? He ain't the boss. I'm the boss. And if I say let's go, you say all right. All right, said Rob. He looked over his shoulder, wishing fervently that Willie May or his father would appear to save him from Beauchamp, knowing at the same time that he could not be saved, that he was on his own. Good, said Beauchamp. Come on, climb on up. Rob climbed into the passenger seat. There was a big brown grocery bag at his feet. Go on, put that in the back, said Beauchamp, as he swung into the driver's seat. The bag was heavy, and it stunk. Rob carefully put it on the floor in the back, and then noticed his hands. There was blood on his fingers. That's just from the meat, said Beauchamp. It won't hurt you none. He cranked the engine. It roared to life, and they were tearing around behind the Kentucky Star and into the woods. Beauchamp drove like he was crazy. He gunned for trees and then swerved away from them at the last minute, whooping and hollering the whole time. You ain't gonna believe what I got to show ya, Beauchamp hollered at him. No, sir, said Rob weakly. What? Beauchamp shouted. No, sir, Rob shouted back. I ain't gonna believe it. But he did believe it. He believed it with all of his heart. Chapter 19. Beauchamp hit the brakes. We're almost there, he said. You gotta close your eyes so it's a surprise. Rob closed his eyes, and the Jeep went forward slowly. Don't cheat now, Beauchamp said. Keep 'em closed. Yes, sir, Rob said. All right, Beauchamp said finally. Go on, open 'em up. He had pulled the Jeep up as close to the tiger cage as possible without driving right into it. Tell me what you see, he crowed. Tell me what's before your very eyes. A tiger, said Rob. He let his mouth drop open. He tried to look excited and amazed. You're right, said Beauchamp. King of the jungle, and he's all mine. Wow, said Rob. You own him? That's right, said Beauchamp. Fellow I know owed me some money. Paid me with a tiger. That's the way real men do business. In tigers. He come complete with cage. The toothpick in the side of his mouth danced up and down. Beauchamp put a finger up to steady it into silence. What are you planning to do with him? Rob asked. I'm studying my options. I figure I could set him up in front of the Kentucky Star, have him draw me in some more business for the motel. The tiger stood and stared at Beauchamp. Beauchamp looked away from him. He tapped his thick fingers on the steering wheel. I also might just kill him, Beauchamp said, and skin him and make me a tiger coat. I ain't made up my mind yet. He's a lot of work, I can tell you that. He needs meat twice a day. That's where you come in. I need you to come out here and feed him. $2 every time you do it. How's that sound? Rob swallowed hard. How do I get the meat in the cage? He asked. Beauchamp dug in his pocket and pulled out a set of keys. With these, he said. He shook the keys, and they gave a sad jingle. Don't pay no attention to the big keys. They're for the locks on the door. Open them up, and the tiger will get out and eat you for sure. You understand? I ought not to give you the whole set, but I know you won't open up that door, right? You ain't no fool, are you? Rob, terrified that keys to the cage existed and that they were about to be handed to him, nodded. See this tiny key? Beauchamp said. Rob nodded again. That's for the food door right there. Beauchamp pointed at a small door at the bottom of the cage. You just open it up like that and toss the meat in, one piece at a time, just like this. Beauchamp swung himself out of the Jeep with a grunt. He reached in the back seat for the grocery bag, took out a piece of meat, bent over, and unlocked the tiny door, opened it, and threw the meat in. The tiger leapt forward, and Beauchamp took a quick step backward, stumbling. That's all there is to it, he said, straightening up. His forehead was shiny with sweat, and his hands were trembling. What's the tiger's name? Rob asked. Name? Said Beauchamp. He ain't got no name. You gotta name something before you toss it a piece of meat. Rob shrugged and blushed. He bent over to scratch his leg so that he wouldn't have to look at Beauchamp's sweaty, angry face. You want to get introduced all proper? Said Beauchamp in a mocking voice. Well, then get on out of the Jeep. Rob climbed down. Beauchamp grabbed hold of the fence and shook it. The tiger looked up from his meat. His muzzle was red with blood. He stared at Beauchamp with a fierce look in his eyes that was familiar to Rob. Hey, Beauchamp shouted. You see this boy here? He pointed at Rob. He's your meal ticket, not me. It's this boy. He's got the keys now. Understand? I don't got 'em no more. This boy's got 'em. He's your boy. The tiger stared at Beauchamp a minute more, and then he slowly lowered his head and started back to work on the meat. Now you two know each other, said Beauchamp. He pulled a tattered bandana from his pocket and wiped the sweat off his forehead. On the hair-raising ride back to the Kentucky Star, Rob realized who the tiger's stare reminded him of. It was Sistine. He knew that when he told her he had the keys to the cage, her eyes would glow with the same fierce light. He knew that she would insist that now they had to let the tiger go. Chapter 20. The last thing Beauchamp said to him was, "Don't forget now, this is our business deal. It don't concern nobody else. You take that bag of meat and hide it somewhere, and I'll bring you more meat tomorrow. In the meantime, you keep your mouth shut." At 3 o'clock, the school bus pulled up, belching and gasping and sighing. Norton and Billy Threemonger started pelting Rob with date palms before the bus even came to a complete stop. The bus door opened, and Sistine came running toward him, dodging the dates, looking as serious as a soldier on a battlefield. "Let's go see the tiger," she shouted to him. Rob was dismayed to see that she was still wearing his shirt and jeans. "Where's your dress?" he blurted. "In here," she said. She held up the same grocery bag that he had given her the night before. "I changed as soon as I got back to the house. My mother doesn't know. I found a book in the library today and read about big cats. Do you know that panthers live in the woods here? We could set the tiger free and he could live with them. Come on," she said. She started to run. Rob ran too, but the keys to the cage felt heavy in his pocket, and they bumped up against his leg and slowed him down so that Sistine beat him there. When he arrived, she was standing pressed up against the fence, her fingers wrapped in the chain link. "Tigers are an endangered species, you know," she said. "It's up to us to save him." "Watch out he don't attack you," Rob said. "He won't. Tigers only attack people if they're desperately hungry." "Well, this one ain't hungry." "How do you know?" Sistine asked, turning around and looking at him. "Well," said Rob, "he ain't skinny, is he? He don't look starved." Sistine stared at him hard, and Rob opened his mouth and let the words fall out. "Keys," he said. Every secret magic word he had ever known, tiger and cancer and Caroline, every word in his suitcase seemed to fall right out of him when he stood before Sistine. "What?" she said. "Keys," he said again. He cleared his throat. I got the keys to the cage." "How?" "Beauchamp," he told her. "He hired me to feed the tiger, and he gave me the keys." "All right," said Sistine. "Now all we have to do is open up the locks and let him go." "No," said Rob. "Are you crazy?" she asked him. "It ain't safe. It ain't safe for him. My friend Willie Mae, she had a bird, she let it go, and it just got ate up." "You're not making any sense," she told him. "This is a tiger. A tiger is not a bird. And I don't know who Willie Mae is, and I don't even care. You can't stop me from letting the tiger go. I'll do it without the keys. I'll saw the locks off myself." "Don't," said Rob. "Don't," she mocked back. And then she spun around and grabbed hold of the cage and shook it, the same way Beauchamp had earlier that day. "I hate this place," she said. "I can't wait for my dad to come and get me. When he gets here, I'm going to make him come out here and set the tiger free. It's the first thing we'll do." She shook the cage harder. "I'll get you out of here," she said to the pacing tiger. "I promise." She rattled the cage as if she were the one who was locked up. The tiger paced back and forth without stopping. "Don't," said Rob. But she didn't stop. She shook the cage and beat her head against the chain link, and then he heard her gasp. He was afraid that maybe she was choking. He went and stood next to her, and he saw that she was crying. Crying. Sistine. He stood beside her, terrified and amazed. When his mother was alive, when he still cried about things, she had been the one who comforted him. She would cup her hand around the back of his neck and say to him, "You go on and cry. I got you. I got good hold of you." Before Rob could think whether it was right or whether it was wrong, he reached out and he put his palm on Sistine's neck. He could feel her pulse beating in time with the tiger's pacing. He whispered to her the same words his mother had whispered to him. "I got you," he told her. "I got good hold of you." Sistine cried and cried. She cried as if she would never stop, and she did not tell him to take his hand away. Chapter 21. By the time they started walking back to the Kentucky Star, it was dusk. Sistine was not crying, but she wasn't talking either, not even about letting the tiger go. "I have to call my mother," she said to him, in a tired voice when they got back to the motel. "I'll go with you," said Rob. She didn't tell him not to, so he walked with her across the parking lot. They were almost to the laundry room when Willie Mae materialized out of the purple darkness. She was leaning up against her car, smoking a cigarette. "Boo," she said to Rob. "Hey," he told her back. "Somebody's following you," she said, jerking her head at Sistine. "This is Sistine," Rob told her. And then he turned to Sistine and said, "This is Willie Mae, the one I was telling you about, the one who had the bird and let it go." "So what?" said Sistine. "So nothing," said Willie Mae. Her glasses winked in the light from the falling Kentucky star. "So I had me a bird." "Why are you hanging around in the parking lot trying to scare people?" Sistine asked. Her voice was hard and mean. "I ain't trying to scare people," said Willie Mae. "Willie Mae works here," said Rob. "That's right," said Willie Mae. She reached into the front pocket of her dress and pulled out a package of 8-ball gum. "You know what?" she said to Sistine. "I know you. You ain't got to introduce yourself to me. You angry. You got all the anger in the world inside of you. I know angry when I meet it. Been angry most of my life." "I'm not angry," Sistine snapped. "All right," said Willie Mae. She opened the package of 8-ball gum. "You an angry liar, then. Here you go." She held out a stick of gum to Sistine. Sistine stared for a long minute at Willie Mae, and Willie Mae stared right back. The last light of dusk disappeared, and the darkness moved in. Rob held his breath. He wanted desperately for the two of them to like each other. When Sistine finally reached out and took the gum from Willie Mae, he let his breath go in a quiet whoosh. Willie Mae nodded at Sistine. Then she extended the pack to Rob. He took a piece and put it in his pocket for later. Willie Mae lit another cigarette and laughed. "Ain't that just like God," she said. "Throwing the two of you together." She shook her head. "This boy all full of sorrow, keeping all down low in his legs, and you," she pointed a cigarette at Sistine. "You, all full of anger, got it snapping out of you like lightning. You're some pair, that's the truth." She put her arms over her head and stretched and then straightened up and stepped away from the car. Sistine stared at Willie Mae with her mouth open. "How tall are you?" she asked. 6'2", said Willie Mae, "and I gotta get on home. But first, I got some advice for you. I already gave this boy some advice. You ready for yours?" Sistine nodded, her mouth still open. "This is it. Ain't nobody coming and rescue you," said Willie Mae. She opened the car down and sat down behind the wheel. "You gotta rescue yourself. You understand what I mean?" Sistine stared at Willie Mae. She said nothing. Willie Mae cranked the engine. Rob and Sistine watched her drive away. "I think she's a prophetess," said Sistine. "A what?" Rob said. "A prophetess," said Sistine. "They're painted all over the Sistine Chapel. They're women who God speaks through." "Oh," said Rob. "A prophetess." He turned the word over in his mouth. "Prophetess," he said again. He nodded. That sounded right. If God was going to talk through somebody, it made sense to Rob that he would pick Willie Mae. Chapter 22. "You out in the woods with that girl again?" his father asked as soon as Rob stepped into the room. "Yes, sir," said Rob. "Look over here, son." His father was standing by Rob's bed. "Sir?" said Rob. His heart sank. He knew what his father had found. The meat. He had hidden it under the bed, and it was time to go and feed the tigers again. "Where'd this meat come from?" his father asked, pointing to at the bloody brown bag. Without thinking, Rob just answered, "Beauchamp." "Beauchamp," his father repeated, low and dark. "Beauchamp. He don't hardly pay me enough to get by, and now he's giving us this rotten meat? He thinks I ain't man enough to put meat on my own table?" Rob wanted to say something, but then he thought of Beauchamp and held his tongue. "I ought to teach him a lesson," his father said. The cords in his neck stood out like twigs. He kicked the bag of meat. "I oughta," he said, making me work for less than nothing, giving us rotten meat." He went and stood in front of his gun case. He didn't unlock it. He just stood and stared and cracked his knuckles. "Daddy?" said Rob. But he couldn't think of anything to say after that. His mother had known how to calm his father. She'd put her hand on his arm or say his name in a soft and reproachful voice, and that would be enough. But Rob didn't know how to do those things. He stood for a minute more, and then he walked over to his bed and grabbed a piece of wood and his knife. As he left the room, his father was still standing at the locked gun case, staring through the glass at the deer hunting rifle, as if he were trying to will the gun into his own hands. Rob walked to the Kentucky Star sign. He sat down underneath it and leaned up against one of the cold, damp poles and started to work on the wood. But his head was too full of his father's anger and Sistine's tears. He couldn't concentrate. He looked up at the dark underside of the sign and recalled lying on a blanket, staring up at a big oak tree. His mother had been on one side of him, and his father, asleep and snoring, had been on the other. He remembered that his mother had taken hold of his hand and pointed up at the sun shining through the leaves of the tree and said, "Look, Rob, I have never in my life seen a prettier color of green. Ain't it perfect?" "Yes, ma'am," he had said, staring at the leaves. "It looks like the original green, the first one God ever thought up." His mother squeezed his hand hard. "That's right," she said. "The first one God ever thought up. The first ever green. You and me, we see the world the same." He concentrated on that green. He let it seep through a crack in his suitcase of not thoughts and fill up his head with color. He wondered if Willie Mae's cricket had been the same bright and original green. That's what he thought about as he carved. And so he wasn't surprised when he stopped and held the wood away from himself to see a wing and a beak and a tiny eye. It was cricket. Willie Mae's cricket coming to life under his knife. He worked on the bird for a long time, until it looked so real that he had half expected it to break into song. When he finally went back to the room, he found his father asleep in the recliner. The gun case was still locked, but the bag of meat was gone. He wouldn't be able to feed the tiger in the morning. He'd have to wait until Beauchamp brought him another package. Rob went and stood over his father and stared down at him. He looked at his heavy hands and the bald spot on his nodding head. He was memorizing him and trying at the same time to understand him, to make some sense out of him, out of his anger and his quiet, comparing it to the way he used to sing and smile when his father jerked away. "Hey," he said. "Hey," Rob said back. "What time is it?" "I ain't sure," said Rob. "Late, I guess." His father sighed. "Go on, get me your leg medicine." Rob brought him the tube of medicine. Outside the motel room, the world creaked and sighed. The rain started in again, and his father's hands were gentle as he applied the ointment to Rob's legs. Chapter 23. The next morning, Rob put the keys to the tiger cage in one pocket and the wooden bird in the other, and he set out looking for Willie Mae. He found her in the laundry room, sitting on one of the folded-up chairs, smoking a cigarette and staring into space. "Hey there," she said to him. "Where's your lady friend at?" "School," said Rob, "but today's only a half day." He kept his hands in his pockets. Now that he stood before Willie Mae, he was afraid to give her the bird. What if it was wrong? What if he had carved it wrong and it didn't look anything like the real cricket? "What you giving me them shifty-eyed looks for?" Willie Mae asked. I made you something," said Rob quickly, before he lost his nerve. "Made me something?" said Willie Mae. "For real?" "Uh-huh. Close your eyes and hold out your hand." "Well, I ain't," said Willie Mae, but she smiled, and she closed her eyes and put out her enormous hand, palm up. Rob carefully placed the bird in it. "You can look now," he told her. She closed her fingers around the little piece of wood, but she didn't reopen her eyes. She puffed on her cigarette. The long gray ash on the end of it trembled. "Don't need to look," she said finally. The cigarette ash dropped to the floor. "I know what I got's in my hand. It's cricket." "But you gotta look at it and tell me I did it right," said Rob. "I ain't gotta do nothing," said Willie Mae, "except stay black and die." She opened her eyes slowly, as if she was afraid she might frighten the bird into flying away. "Ah, this is the right bird," she said, nodding her head. "This the one." Now you don't gotta dream about him no more," said Rob. "That's right," said Willie Mae. "Where'd you learn to work a piece of wood like this?" "My mama," said Rob. Willie Mae nodded. "She taught you good." "Yes, ma'am," said Rob. He stared down at his legs. "I know a wooden bird ain't the same thing as having a real one." "It ain't," agreed Willie Mae, "but it soothes my heart just the same." "My dad said he ain't got no jobs for me until this afternoon. He said I could help you this morning." "Well," said Willie Mae. She dropped the bird into the front pocket of her dress. "I might could find some way for you to help me." So Rob spent his morning following Willie Mae from room to room, stripping the dirty sheets from the beds, and while he worked, the keys jingled in his pocket, and he knew that soon Sistine would be out of school and that she would demand again that he unlock the cage and let the tiger go. Oh, and that's where I'm ending. So that's it for today. Okay. Fun. I will be asking you probably on one of the activities, what would you do? Would you let the tiger go? When Sistine's asking Rob to let the tiger go, what would be your thoughts if you were Rob? What would be sort of maybe the pros and cons? Maybe we'll do that for an activity. Okay, we will talk to you later. Bye.